want to bring to order the December 3rd special called board meeting for the Richland 2 Board of Trustees. If I can please now have a motion for approval of the agenda. Dr. Caution Parker. Can I have a motion for the agenda?
There is nothing here.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, there we go. Somebody. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's December 3rd special called meeting.
All right. Thank you so much. Motion made by Ms. Agostini. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Shad. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, say again. It's unanimous. All right, and the motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda, we have our public participation, and we have two folks signed up. If I can start with Ms. Shanae Parker. If you'll come to the microphone. And Ms. Parker, just as a reminder, these are video recorded, put on YouTube. If you can please state your name, and we're not to mention any specific staff members by name. And you have 3 minutes.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
This is the second time I'm here talking about the same issue. So you guys have a big decision tonight to rezone. I'm not a public speaker, so sorry in advance, but I just stand here. First of all, I appreciate you all giving me an opportunity as a parent to even voice my opinion. Also, I appreciate the 2 community efforts that were made, to kind of give us a more in-depth look behind why this is needed or why the rezoning committee feels that this is needed. And then I also appreciate being a part of and being invited to sit in with the rezoning committee. So I do appreciate those opportunities. And I did come in there with open ears, open heart, and it hasn't changed. I still do not believe that this is the right decision. The biggest issue here is the overcrowding in schools, apparently. So that's why this rezoning effort was brought across in the first place, to kind of prevent it from happening at Catawba. But after listening to kind of some details that we've been told, there's other schools in the area as well that are within a, less than 5-mile radius that are also crowded as well up there. So this isn't going to fix the issue. This is just a Band-Aid, if you ask me. Also, I really hope that you all, and I'm sure you've had the time to look at each and every one of the responses from the parents on those surveys. I've stayed up too many nights reading them over and over again. And over 81% either strongly oppose or oppose this rezoning. And I really hope that you all took the opportunity and looked at the verbatims because they're pretty powerful. For something like this, I feel like more people should be on board. One of the things that I did want to just make, sorry, I have a couple notes here, almost done. But one of the things that I did want to bring to the attention is a lot of people aren't here tonight from our neighborhoods, and that kind of bothered me until I started talking to parents. And a lot of them actually feel like the decision has already been made. So they don't even want to waste their time and even come here because they feel that the decision has already been made. And I feel like you all can show us, or show them rather, because I feel like the decision hasn't been made. I feel like there's still hope. But I feel like you all have a unique opportunity to show parents that the decision hasn't been made. And ultimately, you all each have a vote in this matter. But at the end of the day, I just don't feel like this rezoning effort is going to fix the bigger issue, which is other schools in the area are also overcrowded. Catawba is over 90% crowded, but that's not 100%. They're not over capacity right now. And you all are anticipating these new neighborhoods that are being built right now, but it still doesn't mean that they're over capacity right now. And 5th graders, that's another thing that wasn't brought up. No one brought up how many 5th graders are leaving, how much room it's gonna make at the school, So at the end of the day, I appreciate all of your efforts and thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Next, we have Mr. Gus Philpott.
Good evening, board
Evening.
members, Dr. Davis. My name is Gus Philpott. On tonight's agenda is a revision to board policy JICI, weapons. I'm sure it's not your intent to criminalize legal behavior, but this revision, in my opinion, is not well thought out, and I urge you to pass on it tonight and to involve an advisory committee of staff, teachers, parents, and community members in preparing the next proposed revision. State law on concealed carry in vehicles on school property is being disregarded to the detriment of law-abiding concealed carry permit holders who might wish to commute legally to and from work at one of the district schools with their firearms in the car, and then arrive at school, secure the firearm as required by law, go into work, come out at the end of the day. They can unsecure their weapon, leave the school grounds, and have access to their weapon should they need it while commuting or going about other business. I think there's no need to threaten a felony or misdemeanor offense in a school board policy. The, quote, level of offense, unquote, the words from the policy revision, these appear in JICDAR, and it's a school board term and not to be confused with categories of crimes under state law. I have some knowledge of firearms laws, and I volunteer to be on such a committee if you form it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Philpott. There's no one else who signed up at this time. We will now move on to item 4.1, the approval of our vote on the rezoning for Jacobs Creek and Forest Creek. Dr. Davis?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, administration brings before you the proposal for the rezoning of Jacobs Creek and Forest Creek as presented in a previous board meeting. We're asking for approval to move forward with the rezoning of said neighborhoods from Catawba Trail to Bookman Road.
All right, can I have a motion, please? Board members, if I can have a motion on this item so that we can open up discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Agostini.
I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with the rezoning of Jacobs Creek and Forest Creek.
Okay, the motion's been made by Ms. Agostini. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion? Ms. Mackey?
Chair, couple of questions, and I think I've asked them outside of the board meeting setting as well. Haven't been in these shoes as a parent and undergone the redrawing of attendance lines. One of my concerns was making sure that parents who have concerns or military have an opportunity to speak. I know there's a grandfather clause. Is there not for fifth graders for rising fifth graders and their siblings? Is there not? I want to get that on public record. If there are rising fifth graders and their siblings, are they not grandfathered to the school?
Yes.
Yes, they
Would
are.
you like, we can have someone explaining specifically, either Mr. Simon or Mr. Price can explain specifically how that policy works,
Thank
how
you.
that practice works.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. There is a condition made for students who are rising fifth graders at the school that is being, or who are zoned for the school that's being rezoned. If they wish to stay there for their fifth grade year, then they will have the ability to do that without having to go through the choice process.
Okay.
And their siblings as
and,
well.
And their siblings. Okay. And military. I know that if there's a military, are there any concessions with regard to military, or is there anything else we need to be concerned about? Just wanted to find out.
No concessions in regards to military.
Correct.
My concern is making sure that parents who have concerns have an opportunity to have those concerns heard. That's an issue for me.
And I believe we had, as was stated earlier in public session, several opportunities for families to come and meet with staff, with the school board, opportunities through surveys, and other means of communications. In fact, I think we added a session to give an additional opportunity for parents to be heard per request of the board.
or you haven't attended one of those sessions?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Just answering your question.
Yep,
So,
I appreciate it, having attended one of them. Thank you.
all right, board members, other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Agostini.
I have a question and then a few comments that I would like to make. At last week's town meeting, there was concern or confusion about school choice. And I would just like for it to be confirmed that when a student does choice into a school, that it's done, it's a one and done. It's not done on an annual basis. But when they do choice in, that in fact they're in through the remainder time at the school.
That's correct, Ms. Agostini.
Thank you. And then I want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Davis, Will Simon, and the group for taking on this unpopular task of rezoning and the efforts made to educate, inform, and listen to those impacted by tonight's vote. Tonight's vote is not taken lightly by me, nor do I think by anybody else on the board. I applaud and I appreciate the parents who have come before us or communicated with us to advocate for their children. Additionally, I'm grateful that we have so many great options for our students in Richland too. I want to take a moment to share with you a personal story, not to preach, but to share an experience. My daughter Caroline attended 3 different elementary schools. You see, Caroline was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD in the 1st grade while attending a parochial school, a school that did not have the resources she needed to learn. Prior to the start of each new school, Caroline and I were both anxious and uncertain. Our family approached the idea of a new school with Caroline as a new opportunity to meet new friends while remaining friends with her previous schoolmates. Caroline cried all the way to school on the first day of school to both of her 2 new schools. I cried after carpool drop-off. Prepared for the worst at carpool pickup with an arsenal full of her favorite snacks, both times she hopped in the car after that first day of school with a big smile on her face, sharing how much fun she had and how much she loved her new school and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Agostini. Other comments?
Mr. Manning?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Yes, just want to make a comment to let the parents know that I have responded to all of their emails and I've heard their concerns. And rezoning is always a difficult time, but we also have to do what's best for each and every student that we encounter. So I just want them to know that I heard their calls, but I also understand that we have to do what's in the best interest for our students at all times.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments? I'd also like to iterate that next to our student discipline, this is one of the toughest decisions that I personally feel I have to make as a board member to switch schools for parents. I know that it's tough and it big changes in your home and routines, and not one that I make lightly. Having been through several rezonings, each one is just as difficult as the one before. And with that, unless there's no other comments.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Yes, Mr. Shad.
Thank you. I do want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and also just point out, although it hasn't been said, and it's not just a catchphrase that we like to use here, but Catawba Trail absolutely is an excellent school. You see that with the passion of the parents who were advocating for their kids. And likewise, Bookman Road Elementary is also an excellent school, and I believe that their children are going to be well taken care of by the administration there and the faculty.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. Ms. Mackey, you had an additional comment?
Yeah, just one more response. One thing I wanted to share is that with regard to overcrowding schools, I know that redrawing attendance lines is not a popular thing, having been on the parental side of that and come to board meetings and express my sentiments at that time. But at some point, redrawing of attendance lines is not a one-time thing. I know that we address the growing concerns of our schools on a regular basis. I know as schools are added to the district that we address redrawing of attendance lines, so it's not a one-time thing and it's not something that's happening to one school. Is that correct? Just wanted to make that statement, Dr. Davis, or ask you. Yeah,
That's correct.
It's not a one-time thing and it's not a one school thing.
All right. Board members, any other questions or comments? If you'll please take the vote.
It's
Okay, motion passes 7-0 6-0, unanimous. Since Dr. Teresa Holmes is not feeling well tonight, could not be with us. Next on our agenda, we have item 5, new business, no action requested. And board, please forgive me, I'm not feeling 100%, so I'm trying to save my voice and get through all of these policies. If we can start, Dr. Davis, with item 5.1.
Well, Mr. Smith, walk us through the J policies, Mr. Smith.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The first policy we have is JA, student policies, goals, priorities, objectives. And the change that we have here is we have updated our mission statement with that policy.
All right, board members, questions or comments? We'll now move on to item 5.2, policy revision JB.
With JB, the updates we have here is we updated the district non-discrimination statement with this policy.
All right, item JCA, I'm sorry.
Had a quick question about that, or something to be, I guess, clarified. When we talk about the district, I'm looking at the first paragraph, the district to treat all persons fairly with respect without discrimination of threats of violence or abuse. That's anybody associated with the district. Are we talking about district employees, students, or anybody who's operating in a district capacity? And I presume it's anyone who's working in a district capacity, but I just wanted to get clarification on that, if I could. It's not a change that you've made, it's just the first paragraph.
That's my understanding.
Anybody who's working in a district capacity. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. All right, item policy revision JCA, item 5.3. Board members, are there any questions or comments on the policy revisions?
I just had a comment about that. A comment.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Mackey.
I'm sorry. Mr.
You're good.
King, I didn't want to interrupt.
You're good.
With regard to the first insertion, and I'm sorry, that the green, is that our insertion or school board association? I'm sorry, I should know that.
The green one is, that's the School Board Association.
Okay, I appreciate that. The first insertion with regard to accommodating the special needs of students, I just appreciate that.
Okay.
I wanted to get credit to wherever credit was due with regard to that insertion. I appreciated that. The part that says the district will permit eligible students with disabilities to attend another school, to attend school or another attendance area if facilities within the attendance areas where they reside do not house the needed special education program. So I just appreciate that insertion. That's really important. Thank you.
All right, item 5.4, policy revision JE. Any questions or comments on the provider revisions? Item 5.5, revision JEB. Any questions or comments? Item 5.
With that one, I have
Yes,
one
sir.
thing I want to add. Mainly, this policy contains editorial changes, but we also have, after further review, the administration recommends one additional change on the first paragraph of page 2. We recommend striking the last clause, which reads, "And the school administration determines that he/she is capable of first grade classwork." And we want to put that to say, since students are placed based on age, the district does not assess students to determine grade placement. We wanted to add that. I'll make that change.
Okay, board members, questions or comments on that change? All right, we'll move on to item 5.6, policy revision JFAA. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
with this policy, we received additional feedback from legal counsel regarding JFAA. We would like to pull this policy tonight and include it in the next batch of policies for Section J.
Okay, we don't have any action on that, so you'll just, when we go to when we set the agenda for the next meeting, we'll pull that one.
Okay, thank you.
All right, item 5.7, policy revision JFAB. Questions or comments? 5.8, policy revision JFABB. 5.9,
Mr.
policy.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
Chair, two things.
Okay.
Go back to JFAB.
The JFAB, okay.
With that one, After additional review, the administration recommends one additional change. On page 2, in the section labeled Special Accommodations, we recommend striking the phrase District Board of Residents and replacing it with the phrase District where the student resides. This is an editorial change for clarity.
Okay. Questions or comments on that change? Did you have something with JFABB as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
With that one, after further review, the administration would like to recommend one additional change. On page 2, the last paragraph, we'd like to delete the second sentence, which reads, therefore, seniors are not eligible to participate in the student exchange program. This change will allow seniors to participate with the understanding, however, that they will not receive a diploma.
Okay. Questions or comments?
Ms. Manning, I have
Yes.
a comment.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Elkins Johnson.
I would just like to say that I think, in the future, if the district has any changes to the policy, that they can get those changes to us in advance, because I know they like the same courtesy. So if they don't mind getting those changes to us in advance, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins Johnson. We'll now move on to item 5.9, policy revision JFABD. Item 5.10, policy revision JFABE. Item 5.11, policy revision JFABF. Anybody who would like to call bingo any way along the way, please feel free to do so. Policy revision JFC. Policy revision JIB. Item 5.14, policy revision JI. Item 5.15, policy revision JIAA. Item 5.16, policy revision JIC.
Oh, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
With JIAA, we have two options. The first option is from the School Board Association, one that you see there. The second option, which you received by email last week, is from legal counsel. And legal counsel provided us with the draft of that policy last week. So I want to make sure that.
So are those two in conflict with each other, or?
The one with legal counsel has, it outlines more of what we need to make sure we have everything covered. The first option has some, but because of some cases that we've had, legal counsel made some addition to that. That's with the option 2.
I tend to side with legal counsel.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not an option.
Option,
We're
yeah.
recommending the version of legal counsel.
Okay, so that's what staff is recommending. Board members, are there any issues or questions about that?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Mr. Shad?
Ms. Smith, is it safe to say that the second version, which has been offered up by our legal counsel, includes everything that has been submitted by School Boards Association?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments on that? All right, since I lost my place, I'm just going back to 5.16, policy revision JIC. Item 5.17, policy revision J. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Is 5.1C JIC, didn't they rescind that?
That is correct. It says rescind on there.
Okay, just want to make sure.
That's correct. Sorry, I'll be sure to say rescind when it says that in the future. 5.17, policy revision JIBA.
Mr. Manning?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Elkins Johnson.
I do have just a question about that. For the student government, it mentions that the meeting minutes will be available for the entire student body. And I was wondering, how would the student body be made aware of that? If someone could just tell me.
Dr. Elkins Johnson, this is Dr. Davis. I would think that the best way to do that is to simply post those meetings on the school's website. for accessibility.
So is there any way you guys, Dr. Davis, could go back and maybe insert that in the policy JIDA?
That may be one method of providing the minutes. If we do put it in there specifically, then that becomes the policy. So therefore, emailing them to the students would not be acceptable, or providing hard copies to the students would not be acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. All right. Any other questions? Item 5.18, policy revision JICDA.
Mr. Manning?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Eccles Johnson.
I'm sorry, I have a few. Just wanted to ask a question about JICDA. It's referencing a code of conduct, and I'm just wondering, how can we really make a decision about voting on that one, or even giving it the first reading, when we actually rescinded JIC, which is really a partner of the JICDA, student conduct.
Dr. Eccles Johnson, it's my understanding that because we have JICDA and that we have JICDA-R, we did not need JIC. So it was redundant because we have it in policy JICDA, which is actual the policy. That's why JIC was rescinded.
Okay, and one other question, Dr. Davis. As I was looking at JICDA, do you think we should go back to include something that will reference social media?
In what area, Dr. Eccles Johnson? Is there a specific location?
No, I was just wondering if you guys could go back and insert that, because what you're talking about is actually the student conduct on and off campus. And I know a lot of times things that transpire through social media is brought back to the school site. So that's why I was wondering if we could include that.
I believe it's in a, we could, I believe it's in a separate policy where we're including social media in their student conduct. It's a specific policy for social media.
Right, because when you go back and you look at this policy and it says the administrative rule is effective during the following times and in the following places. You talk about on school grounds at any other time, off the school grounds at a school activity, function, or event. So I was wondering if we could insert it, that bullet right in that area for the administrative rule.
Dr. Eccleston, I think Dr. Franklin wants to make a mention here.
Yes, ma'am. And policy JICJA, which is in the next batch of policies, is specific about social media and electronic communication. So what you're mentioning is in that policy.
Okay.
That will be reviewed in the next batch.
Okay, were there other questions? All right, item 5.19, policy revision JICEA. Item 5.20, policy revision JICF.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
With that one, we had some more information. After review, the administration recommends one more change on page 1. We recommend that we strike the last 2 sentences and replace it with language that clarifies we will not display gang indicators, but rather make them available for review.
I'm sorry, repeat that.
We would like to recommend that we strike the last 2 sentences and replace it with the language that clarifies we will not display gang indicators, but rather make them available for review.
Okay. Board members, other questions or comments? All right. Item 5.21, policy revision JICFAA. 5.22, policy revision JICH. Yes, ma'am, Dr. Eccles Johnson.
I have a question about policy 5.22 JICA. If you look at the second, I'm not sure if it's screen there so if you want to see it, but right at the, under the bullet alcohol or other controlled substance will be considered for expulsion dependent on case findings, previous infractions, and grade point average. And I would love to see grade point average removed, because unless someone can explain to me why it makes a difference with their grade point average and having alcohol in school, whether or not you be expelled.
Dr. Elkins Johnson, there's no explanation for that. That's a great suggestion. We need to strike grade point average.
All right. Do I have a motion to strike grade point average? Dr. Johnson, you want to formally make that motion?
Absolutely. I would like to make a motion on 5.22 JICH, drug and alcohol use by students, that we strike grade point average.
Motion's been made by Dr. Elkins Johnson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Shad. Any discussion? If we can just do can we do hand vote, Tamika, or are you going to do it on the system? Okay, we can do a hand vote. Everybody in agreement? Dr. Elkins Johnson, if you want to say aye for me.
Yes, aye.
Thank you. All right, motion passes unanimous. All right, other questions or comments on 5.22 policy revision JICH? Item 5.23 policy revision JICI.
Mr. Manning?
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a few questions about that. And when I'm looking at weapons, and you got weapons and food, I was wondering, should we include pepper spray and mace? Dr. Davis, what's your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure, Dr. Elkins Johnson, if it's not already covered specifically in anything that will cause harm to a person. But of course, we're amenable to administration's amenable to the board's recommendation should that be included. There's no reason why we could not. As I'm rescanning the policy, because I didn't make note specifically of that.
Because if you go in that first paragraph on the weapons, and it starts to just talk about the blades, the knuckles, slingshot, and it goes on, I was wondering if we could insert any type of mace or pepper spray.
Can I ask somebody who's maybe been a high school principal, is it typical for students to potentially have those types of things on their keychains just for a normal course of protection?
Excuse me, I wouldn't say that it's typical, but I wouldn't say that it's never been seen before either. So there have been situations where a student has been in possession of that. And unfortunately, we've had situations where a student has actually discharged pepper spray in the past while on the bus, which impacted a lot of students while riding.
Okay. I didn't know Go ahead, Ms. Mackey. No, I was going to say, I don't want this to sound in any direction. I know a lot of times women carry that for protection. I didn't know. I wanted to make sure that we weren't implementing something that somehow, put undue sort of focus on girls in particular that may normally carry that in just the line of protecting themselves. That was kind of where I was going with that.
Mr. Manning, if I may clarify, just because I say it's not uncommon for it to be found does not mean that it is allowed. It is specifically told to students that it is not allowed on campus.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms.
Yeah,
Mackey.
that was.
I got Ms. Mackey and then Dr. Elkins Johnson.
That was my question as well. I wouldn't want to impede. I know that the items that are listed here are can be used or typically as weapons. I know that with pepper spray / mace, I know that it's used as an item of protection and safety, and I wouldn't want to impede anyone's safety.
Right.
Especially if a parent has, in this climate where there are kidnappings and things of that nature that are running rampant in the area, I wouldn't want to impede anyone's safety.
Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Yes, and I wanted to include that we've had students come before us for recommendation for expulsion for having pepper spray and mace on property. That's why I wanted to include that, because I don't want to mislead students or their parents. And then we recommend them for expulsion, because it has been done since I've been on the board, where students have come before us for recommendation for expulsion for carrying pepper spray and mace on campus. And again, having it to explode on buses as well, because of the health issues of other students.
Okay, so Dr. Elkins Johnson, you want to make a motion for that? Oh,
I've got a question.
Ms.
before-
Mack, you have another question?
Is it not because, well, since I've been on the board, that students were recommended because they discharged it or used it in a manner as a weapon? From my experience, it's because it was discharged and it was used inappropriately, improperly,
We've had
not
that.
just because they had it in
Yes.
their presence on them.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Ms. Shad.
and I don't know where I'm going to fall on this with Dr. Elkins Johnson's expected motion. But I do seem to recall someone coming before us who possessed it, didn't discharge it, and it was so that they could go back and forth to school without being harmed by some member of the public. I don't know if y'all remember that. I can't remember how we addressed it.
Right.
But the very possession of it was evidently a concern for the school. And that was part of the recommendation for expulsion. So just like Dr. Elkins Johnson said, they possessed it. In their appeal, that was the explanation for why they possessed it, not that they had any intention of harming anyone at school, but to protect themselves going to and from school because of, unfortunately, the neighborhood that they were going through. So I just wanted to remind us of that.
I would,
And if I could just add on to what Mr. Shad just stated, and actually we sent that student to Blythewood Academy.
I think if I can make a recommendation, because I think we also had somebody in our public session make mention of the potential impact for faculty with concealed weapons permits. Can we maybe refer this policy back to staff and have it looked at as it relates to mace, pepper spray? Would that have an impact with staff with concealed weapon permits? And maybe just, I don't know if we even need to have legal counsel, just give it a look over and see if we need to address any additional issues with it.
Well, the only thing on that, Mr. Chair, is that it looks like this particular one. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I wasn't recognized. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
That's all right. Actually, Mr. Shad had started already. Can I let him go and then you, Dr. Elkins Johnson?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
It just looks like JICI only addresses students. It doesn't address staff.
I think we referred back to it in the.
I think we've already addressed it actually in the policy before that's already been passed.
Okay, I just thought it referred back to this policy on what weapons were.
It's just that one
Right.
section refers
Right.
to what weapons are.
It does. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I guess since I still had the floor.
Yeah.
My only concern too about adding the pepper spray, and I still don't know where I'm going to fall, but with the mace and the pepper spray, obviously it's intended to defend, but of course it can be abused just like any other, something that also has some several uses, like this food preparation utensils that's in here can eventually become a weapon. But I don't know if I want to put that in here, especially when we're talking about us saying it's a felony offense or it's a misdemeanor to have these items when, commercially they're sold, they're allowed in a lot of places. I just don't know where we should fall in terms of our schools. Because again, like it was stated, the students know they're well aware that they're not supposed to have those items on campus. Now, if they choose to do it, then we'll just address
And
it.
I'll hear from Dr. Elkins Johnson. I think that was part of my request to maybe have it refer back to staff to sort of give it another once over. But let me get Dr. Elkins Johnson and then Dr. Caution Parker. Dr. Elkins Johnson?
Well, I was going to go on to a different paragraph in this policy, so if Dr. Caution Parker is relating to this, then I can let her go first.
Okay, Dr. Caution Parker.
In my opinion, it's covered. Any other deadly instrument used for the infliction of bodily harm or death. So that covers a lot of stuff. So if we start enumerating or writing out what we consider to be a weapon or whatever, we're going to have to put a screwdriver in there. We're going to have to put a monkey wrench in there. We're going to have to put all sorts of things in there. But I think that it's pretty well covered. Any other deadly instrument used for the infliction of bodily harm or death. So I think it's covered.
Well, let me do this. Dr. Johnson, kind of in light of sort of our last session on process, since you were the one who kind of initiated it, do you have a motion on what you want to see in this policy specifically? Then I am Dr. Johnson. Did you have a specific motion you wanted to make?
No, I didn't make a motion. I was just asking for suggestions.
Right. No, I knew you did, and I was.
Right,
Oh, okay.
I'm okay with not making a motion for that.
Okay.
But I wanted to go to page 2.
Yes, ma'am.
And the first paragraph where it states that the board directs the superintendent will make recommendations for expulsion within this policy, except that the superintendent on a case-by-case basis may modify this expulsion requirement. And I was wondering if we need to go back and change that from the superintendent to the board, because the superintendent cannot modify expulsions because expulsions come before the board unless I'm misreading this. And Dr. Davis, maybe you can help me if I'm misreading.
Dr. Davis, recommendation on that?
It's on page 2, that second line where it says this policy accepts that the superintendent on a case-by-case basis may modify this expulsion requirement.
I believe it's speaking to modifying the recommendations, not modifying the actual expulsion, Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Okay.
Once the student is actually expelled,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you for the clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
So can I make a motion that we refer this policy to staff for one further review before it comes back before us? That's my motion. Okay, with no second, we will move on. All right. 5.24, policy revision JIE/JIF/JIG. Item 5.25, policy revision JLCD. Item 5.26, policy revision JLCDB. And that is a new policy. Policy revision JLCDA, which also is a new policy. Item 5.28, policy revision JLCC. Item 5.29, policy revision JLCF, which is a new policy. And policy item 5.30, policy revision JLCE. All right, with that, if I can have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Manning, I move to adjourn the meeting.
The motion has been made by Ms. Mackey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Shad. If we can all raise our right hands and a voice vote from Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.